Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Jonathan Dexter, Engineering Practice Director at Nerdery, and your host and moderator for a virtual edition of today's Nerd Therapy. Your in-person event is canceled. Now what? For those of you who are here for the first time, Nerd Therapy is both an event and a community of digitally focused business leaders, product owners, strategists, designers, and engineers working at the leading edge of technology and working to invent a world that is better for all. Before we introduce our panelists, I want to quick go over our format for those that might be new. We're going to break up the event into about 3 parts. The first part, we're going to have a guided discussion with our panelists about some of the key problems that are facing us in virtual events right now. The second part, we will be using the questions that you all submit in the Q&A functionality found at the bottom of your Zoom to be able to ask your questions and get to the answers that you're most interested in. So please, throughout that first part, submit the questions, upvote the questions that may interest you, and we'll be sure to get to them during that second part. Lastly, after we close, we will bring all of the attendees in on mute by default to attend a post-event mixer, where all of you can join in the conversation and share what you've learned, what you're challenged with, or anything that might be interest you in this area. Now, lastly, what event wouldn't be complete without some swag? So you can find a virtual swag bag in the chat functionality, or we will also be sending that out via email after the event, and you can find that in your inbox. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Firstly, I have with us Kada Sigl, Think Conference Manager for IBM.
Thanks, Dexter. Thanks for bringing me in.
I also have Cam MacIntosh, Global Programs Lead at Google.
Hi, folks. Great to be here.
Sydny Layne joins us from agency EA, where she serves as Digital Director.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
And lastly, Derek Chin, Director of Strategic Innovation for Nerdery.
Hey, Dex. Thanks.
So firstly, why don't we kick this off a little bit? Sydny, I'd love to ask you who you are, and can you share a little bit about your work?
Sure. So I'm Sydny Layne. I'm the Digital Director at Agency EA, which is a full-service brand experience agency. I oversee our digital department, which is very relevant in the world today. We're typically tasked with all digital related elements of an event, including website development, registration, mobile apps, pre-event communications and marketing, as well as any on-site technology such as NFC, RFID, tracking attendee behaviors, all of the above and more. And of course, in today's world, our focus has been on developing strategies to execute events within a virtual environment, as well as sourcing and managing solutions that can not only host content, but that cater to a remote audience and enhance engagement.
Great, thank you. And Kada, you joined us from IBM and are responsible for the Think conference. Could you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, thanks, Dexter. So I am Kada from IBM, and I am the Global Conference Manager. I have a great responsibility. I tend to be the conduit, if you will, to some amazing team members who actually contribute, build, execute on our global conferences. So I work across, our teams with our vendors, our sales organizations, our executive teams, and I pull it all together for our face-to-face events.
Great, thank you. And Cam, could you just say a few words about the work efforts that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure. So I have the privilege, similar to Kada, of leading a great team that helps to deliver Google Cloud Next, which is Google Cloud's premier event series, typically physical and digital. So usually about 40,000 people in San Francisco over 4 to 5 days. But we also have a huge digital attendee base, which is sort of around 300,000. So I manage the team that delivers the web and mobile experience for that, along with a second hat, which is I look after our third-party engagement. So where Google Cloud turns up at third-party events and how we turn up there.
And Derek, you and I might know each other, but not everybody joining does. So Derek, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, Dex. I'm the Director of Innovation at Nerdery. And so basically, whenever our clients are thinking really big and want to make some bold moves, I'm the person that gets brought in to help facilitate and to develop the strategy around that. So 2020 has been just ripe full of opportunity for my work due to all the circumstances that we've been facing. Looking forward to joining the chat here.
Great. Well, then let's kick it off. So I think there are a lot of people. I mean, the whole context of this is that events are getting canceled, right? For various reasons. So I think a lot of those individuals are asking themselves, well, what makes a good virtual event versus what makes a good physical event? So Sydney, from your perspective, working with these customers facing this challenge, what are you advising them on as things that they should pay attention to and things that they should ignore that are physical only?
Yeah, it's a great question to start off on. The biggest thing that I not only preach to our internal teams, but of course any of our clients or partners we're working with, is that going virtual is not about retrofitting your live experience into an online environment. It's about authentically evolving your programming and content in a way that can be shared and consumed virtually. You really need to think about the goals of your event. Why were you putting your event on in the first place, even your live experience? What did your attendees get out of that, and what is most valuable to them? Or what is most valuable to your sponsors, the people who are typically involved? And how can you take those and make those key priority content pieces available in a way that is consumable and fits this new kind of culture and environment we're living in, where everything's from behind a screen, you have multiple tabs up, your emails going off? How can we make sure that it fits into their everyday life, given they're now in a new environment as well?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think for me, as I think about myself, sitting in front 8 hours in front of a screen is very different than attending a conference. And Cam, you at Google have been challenged with this a little bit and have been rethinking how you've been doing your physical versus virtual events. In your mind, what have been the lessons that you've learned in taking some of the physical stuff, physical experience for Next, and bringing it into a different format for virtual?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting challenge, first of all. And I think, Sydney touched on so many good points about really sort of now unpacking that user experience. So the user experience is certainly very different now, with everything being virtual or digital. And I think the lessons we've really started to unpack from our user base, attendees, customers, and that is really this whole serve, don't sell, and make sure that the content and everything that you're producing is helpful. So when we sort of look into that helpfulness really comes from having the content available to consume when the user can. Everybody is out of sorts with office placements, working from home environments, which might mean family and distractions and interruptions. So providing a platform that people can engage in when it suits them, we're seeing is super critical to make that service to them helpful and relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kada, for Think, what recommendations would you have as you're approaching this challenge for somebody who's figuring out how to take what they have for in person and bring it to the digital world?
I can build off what Sydney and Cam have both said. For us, it was really important as well. So taking a look at what our attendees are expecting and what we usually provide them for a face-to-face event. So how do we actually take that and deconstruct what we might have been doing in San Francisco and build an event for them virtually? And how do we make sure they still get the same value out of our conference that we might have had face-to-face? So like you said, Sydney, we did break it apart a little bit, and we made sure that we, brought 4 really key areas to the conference. And that was really around the content, as we all would agree, is really our strongest feature. And also making sure that we had our technical education, but very important to our attendees was the networking, and making sure that we had a way for them to network, engage with their, SMEs, connect with our executives, and really be able to feel like they were part of the experience and able to contribute as well.
That's a fantastic point. That networking challenge it feels so easy in person, but in a digital environment where we're all sitting maybe thousands of miles away from each other, becomes much harder. So Derek, as we approach that sort of space where users are we're going to events for content, yes, but also networking and for, possibly just understanding more. How do we enable digital platforms to provide that networking capability when it's not as easy to just walk up to somebody and shake their hand?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. And I was actually reading an article the other day that said if virtual networking was so easy, then why would you limit it to just a 4-day thing? Why wouldn't you do it every single day all the time? And it raises a good question because you're trying to replicate that shared experience. I think that is the magic about the physical event is you've made the same commitment that everybody else has. You're all there together. You're doing the same things. And I think it's going to be a huge challenge in 2020 to figure out how do we replicate that magic and how do we replicate that openness that people have and shift it to a virtual event. So I'd kick it back to some of our panelists for some ideas that they have noodling around on ways to do that.
I was going to jump in because, we've seen across the board, just as you said, Derek, that networking is one of the biggest pain points because you have to think about it where, how do attendees find each other? We're not walking around, like you said, anymore with at certain F&B moments, or it's not a trade show. We need to find a way to uncover that natural layer to allow human connection but from behind a screen, as I was saying before. So there's so many solutions out there that support networking. Obviously, video conferencing is going to be the closest thing that we get, but really, again, how are attendees finding each other or other sponsors? I think you have to really evaluate how your attendees, even in a live environment, prefer to network. Is it something where they come year over year and they're used to seeing the same kind of people and they'll know how to search and look for those that they want to talk to? Or is it that you have a variety of audiences that might be showing up with different backgrounds and different industries, et cetera, and maybe it's more topic-based types discussions that can bring people together, or interests, or do attendees want to meet with sponsors and experts? You really have to evaluate the way in which people are trying to find each other to then create the best user experience to get them to be able to filter and search in the right way, in addition to hosting the video platform itself and how people are getting there. One of the big things I keep mentioning when we think about an agenda, which is a bigger topic we can obviously divert to as well, is, if you're using a solution that hosts conversations, you need to find the time to bring people to that solution to then talk to one another. We're no longer, like we were saying before, you're not sitting on this website for 8 hours. It's not the same thing as being in a venue. So giving people the dedicated time or bringing people back by saying this topic discussion will happen at 4 p.m. is going to be really critical to try to drive people to the same place at the same time, especially because they can navigate on the web all day in a variety of ways. Those are just some of the initial thoughts that we always share with our clients.
Yeah. That's a great point. Kada, in your experience, in your exploration, what technologies or approaches have you been using in order to kind of enable that shared moment experience that you get in a physical event?
Yeah, so for some of our networking activities, we engaged in a few things on our platform with Watson Media, and we had, the very standard, chat, right? Chat was a way for our folks to engage and start a conversation. We also took it to another point of just doing the Q&A, being able to surface up questions and having SMEs on the background answers through some of those questions. I think one of the other ways, we certainly have been thinking of a lot of unique ways to actually engage with our attendees, but one way that we took it is we actually worked with Slack as well. And while we were actually viewing some of the sessions, our reps were working with their clients in the background, having a Slack conversation, because we couldn't just hold that, chat right within the platform itself. So they were having a unique conversation outside while watching the experience. And I think that gave them that opportunity to have that conversation because they weren't in the same room together, and be able to elaborate a little bit more on the points that were being made in the presentations.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also curious from your perspective, Cam. I mean, sponsorships and partners are important to every conference. And it feels like in the virtual environment that conversation can become a little bit shifted. There's not an expo center where I can walk into and meet these people. How does that shared moment have an implication on people interacting with sponsors or partners in a way that they might be able to engage new business relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a challenge everybody's trying to figure out. You know, the traditional model of the exhibition floor is that's where I go to engage with sponsors and to find my next partner and stuff. And I think that it's an interesting challenge. We've seen lots of attempts at these virtual showrooms and virtual show floors and stuff, which some look great, some I'm not sure. And then some of the other opportunities there, I think really start to, when you layer in how sponsors, and for us, all sponsors are also partners of Google Cloud, which is a really nice thing. So we work with them on a daily basis. And I think that when you can start bringing them into demonstrating the solutions that they are building for their customers, you're actually now changing that conversation from more of a sort of like cold conversation where you walk up to a warm conversation of, I've seen an example where that partner or thing works to do this, and that is something that I can see value in. So I sort of have a warm lead into that. So we're really looking at our upcoming conference about any of our product layers or solution layers and the content that we're building there. Where do those sponsors and partners really come in to demonstrate where that value add is to that example? So we might be talking about a X topic, and then we might say, well, here are some great products which we have to facilitate that, but here is also a partner or / sponsor, which can actually help you create this type of experience for your customers and for your business. And here's an example of it. So really what's interesting for us is we're looking at this digital demos is a huge part of where we're sort of focused on. And I really like the point before that Kada made around the importance of training, because I think the importance of training and stuff there is to enable people, and digital is a great platform for training. We're seeing more and more sort of like global universities and stuff move to an online sort of model, which is learn when you're ready. So it's almost like this approach we're taking at the moment in the digital space is like content as a service, which for anybody in IT would understand that everything is as a service, but content as a service is a really interesting sort of play on things. So I think that that's a nice way that you can still have that balance, including sponsors and partners, but always thinking about, well, what's that benefit to that attendee coming here? They want to be able to connect and understand to reach that because they're coming here for a goal and a purpose. And I think that's what Sydney said before.
That's a great point. How do we communicate as Sydney that value of attending if somebody's maybe thinking, hey, I'm not thinking about attending this anymore because it's not an in-person event, some of that shared moment isn't there. How does that value get communicated as we shift to a digital first experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really does go back to communicating the value and the benefit of attending. I mean, of course, if somebody is interested purely in networking, you would hope that, of course, whoever's owning the conference, or if it was us, we would suggest something like making sure that that's still the focal point and that doesn't go away. It's kind of interesting too, because I think right now there's a lot of oversaturation of webinars and things going on in this world. So your content is going to be your biggest driver, your speakers and what you're providing. Cam put it beautifully. It's not about selling, it's about giving our attendees what they want and what they're going to value, especially in relation to this current environment and what people are feeling and thinking, and being mindful of that. And you can try to engage people 100 times over, but truly the value and the quality of that production content and what you're bringing in and what you're bringing to the table should be driving the focal point of any of your communications, and should be bringing your attendees in, even if they come for that one initial keynote, even getting them there for that, even if they don't engage with anything else, you still got them in the door and they were still interested. And if networking is a big piece of this for your attendees, we found tons of ways to do that and we'll still accomplish that. But yeah, I mean, it's all about how your messaging of what your priorities are, of the benefit of still attending online, right?
Yeah, so I think we've talked a little bit about, the defensive play of moving to virtual. Derek, I'd love to kind of ask you, well, what benefits are provided in a virtual platform that may not exist in the physical platform? What sort of innovative spaces can we maybe start to think about that wouldn't exist normally in an event that we can lean in on as part of establishing a virtual event?
Yeah, so what I think is interesting here is, a lot of these companies and a lot of these events, really big ones have canceled, right? So you have like South by Southwest and the Olympics and Cannes Film Festival that are just like, I'm out. But you have these other people like IBM and Google and a lot of the clients that Sydney represents that are like, no, this is our chance to lean in. This is our chance to do the things that we maybe have thought were crazy for the past few years, but like, let's do it this year and let's see if it works. I think there is an unprecedented opportunity here to capture data and insights about what is resonating with people and what is not, because beyond just looking out into a crowd and seeing who's nodding or seeing how big that crowd is, we've never before had access to how many people are actually engaged and are looking, how many people have clicked off and are, signed out. It's not as awkward to just X out of your screen versus get up in the middle of a presentation and walk out. So I think we're going to find out a lot about content this year.
Yeah, Derek, that's an awesome point. That's something we've been discussing as well. Is it's going to, really change the game with programming. We will not only have metrics on, we'll now have metrics on that drop off, but we can really start to cater the future programming to understand how long content should be, what topics seem to be most engaging, or what points of the presentation people started dropping. I mean, it's going to really be revolutionary in how we're developing content, even in a live setting.
Yeah, and to build on that point, we're doing that right now, right? So we're having, just every day we're still looking at the data that came in, and we're still seeing our attendees come in and view our live, our on-demand content. It's amazing, what we're seeing, how long they're spending, how many sessions they've watched, how often they visited the on-demand content, all the different countries. It's really incredible. So this is a big opportunity for all of us as we, approach this whole new world.
Yeah, and I think I'd build off both of the other speakers here that have said that while we're looking at this thing, Derek, you put it really nicely about these are big opportunities. And I like to think that I still engaged at Google because I look at those big opportunities, those big things that I can look to do. And one of the nicest things about digital is it actually is more inclusive. So funnily enough, you reduce those barriers to entry for so many people around cost and travel and being away from family and all of those. As soon as you move to digital, it's super inclusive. So the great thing there is about you now open up a whole new area of possibility to reach further and reach different groups and new people and potentially help people that didn't have that sort of access before. And that's a critical piece that we're hyper focused on right now, about making sure that we're translating as much of our content as we can, and we're running global sessions for those content and localized versions of it with local customers, local examples, to really be able to sort of serve this to everybody. And yeah, I think it's true to what everybody said. The analytics that's going to come back for it, we're putting as much as we can into it because we're really interested about what that's going to serve up. And I think to Sydney's point, it's going to change it. It's going to change digital consumption. It's going to change the way that we program. It's going to change the way that we potentially even construct the structure of these events in a delivery method to people. So I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to hear too a little bit about, as we're getting these events are going live and we're learning more about them, how the communication about these events changes, the marketing communication and the delivery of, well, this is no longer maybe a 3-day, 24-hour thing, but here I'd still like you to know about it. So Sydney, could you share a little bit about how you've seen that shift?
Of course. And I was actually going to jump in because that's exactly where my head was going to, Dex. when Cam was speaking of, now that you have the opportunity to reach so many more people, it's really important to kind of evaluate your investment in your marketing budget as well. We've recommended shifting some dollars even to paid media and additional means to kind of get in front of people that, maybe traditionally wouldn't come again due to either distance or travel, et cetera. That's just one pre-event, approach that you could take, obviously pending the use case. But thinking of communications generally, again, we need to remember where the audience is coming from in the space that they're currently in. The frequency at which you're sending emails, especially right before a live moment is about to happen or right before the event, making sure you have an add to calendar feature that integrates with any native calendar. Because think about it, we all are sitting at our desktops, our laptops, our desktops, our phones. We rely on our calendars every day. We get those notifications. We need to think about how we're reaching people in the way that they're used to communicating and keep staying organized in their own natural way, to make sure that they're coming to the space and coming to the event on time, especially because in email nowadays too, it's going to get buried. So, you want to send that reminder pretty close to when it's going to happen versus we used to send no before you goes a day or two before. Just thinking through things like that, it's going to be really crucial in driving that, the visitors.
Yeah, Sydney, I'm so glad you said that. I think that, at IBM, we certainly made all those attempts, right? And had such a great opportunity, Cam, to your point, to reach so far and broad that, our attendance this year was amazing. I mean, we were, what we anticipated, we thought, okay, moving to a digital event, we'd probably see twice our expected attendance. But when we started to see it grow to fourfold, it was incredible. And I think it was, also that we had an opportunity to, take over IBM.com and, put, everything across the world about driving us back to this event, because it was at no cost and everybody could attend. So we had an incredible opportunity, and I'll tell you what, it was quite exciting when you started to see, one registration come in every 9 seconds, right? So wow. When we're used to driving events that, you're sort of seeing that pick up on a gradual approach. And then when you start to count it by the seconds, it was impressive.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. I'd also love to hear, we were talking briefly about the data a little bit earlier, and I think something on a lot of the forefront of implementers' minds is the value of sponsorships and how do they communicate the value of a digital one versus the value of a physical one. So as we approach, virtual events, how are we still getting sponsors to be part of the conversation and not disengaging, thinking that, oh, this is a different thing, it's not a place for me, and include them in the planning process for events? Derek, could you talk a little bit about what you've seen?
I'm actually going to kick this one out to, well, actually any of the panelists, because I'm sure they have been living and breathing this for the past few months.
It looks like she's about to jump on this. So.
I'm happy to start. Yes, this has been a challenge. Of course, at in-person events, the value of sponsors investing their dollars is to get exposure. It's to have that big booth or that presence and be able to talk to attendees. Of course, in some instances, it's about getting their name out there and collecting those leads, right? And when you go virtual, you can still have your booth. I'm going to put that in quotes. You can still have your information up on, a landing page, but to them, is it still valuable to pay for that? And knowing that there's going to be a slew of other pages available, and how can they still find the value of investing their dollars? And there's a lot of ways. We put together a number of prospectuses for our clients that kind of tier out different options and ways that they can engage sponsors beyond kind of hosting the video embed, which is still incredibly valuable, and having maybe a call to action to schedule meetings, which also very critical because they want that one-on-one time. But, including them either in sessions or giving them a session time slot. And if that's too much for you, then even maybe they're a part of a panel or they host a panel. They could sponsor a track where in all the sessions we can add, interstitial videos that are, say sponsored by, and they're relevant to that sponsor, or, almost like ads in a way. There's actually a lot of possibility to integrate them in the content. It just really depends on, your brand goals and how you feel comfortable with the balance of having the sponsorship exposure. But it's still so valuable, and even better, you can give, again, concrete metrics at the end of how many views were at that session that either they hosted, were a panelist on, or had their logo present. They can still collect leads probably even more seamlessly than before and still have those meetings. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there.
I can build on that, Sydney. Yeah, I agree. And I think at IBM, we too took the advantage of using interstitials to actually promote our business partners. But we're taking a very strong approach right now. We're, working as a team to really look at all the different opportunities that are going on out there. Take the time to, understand what's happening. There's so much information and sessions like this that we all have a chance to learn. And so really looking at what is valuable to our partners, having some focus groups with them, understanding what it is that we can help, make it important for them as well. So we're spending a lot of time on that, and we're excited to see what's about to come. And, on our next version, on our next digital event, what we can, do together. So great points.
That's a great point.
I'm kind of excited to see what Cam's doing.
Yeah, look, I think touching on what we said before, like making them part of that content journey is super important.
Yeah.
And I think that when you start to lay it out, as much as for ourselves and IBM, we have great teams that come up with great products and great solutions and stuff, but the coalface of actually putting them in customers' hands comes through partners or sponsors, about how they actually work with those customers to put them. So what we actually get back of those great demos, those examples of how this product has really worked, often even surprises us. We think, hey, this is a really great feature and a really great product. Then we see it being used out in the wild and we're like, wow, that's got this. And it actually helps us to then refine product and all that. And so it's a really great sort of circle with customers and partners about that. When you take that into that digital space, I think Sydney made the point earlier about when they're actually part of that content journey and they're actually finding opportunities to be on that type of panel or contribute to their ideas into that session. The collective of all of those, if you step back and you're an attendee, a customer, that's the value that you want. It's not just that single sort of lens. I'm looking for Google, I'm looking for IBM. I'm looking for that multiple lens to say what's right for me. You can see it in the cloud space happening, that hybrid cloud is the most successful rather than a one single cloud offering to any type of business, because you're giving that user the choice that's right for them, right? So at the core of what we always focus on is like, what is right for that user? I know anybody that's read anything Google are probably sick of hearing that, but it's really at the core of, if it's right for the user and you're giving them that right thing, I think that's super interesting. The last point I'd make is something that Sydney touched on as well, is we're providing an opportunity for a hot lead to those sponsors and stuff directly from the content. So if they are involved in everything, the attendee can click on there and go straight through to the partner and actually start engaging with them. Bypassing us, we're just providing that vehicle to them. When you step back and think about it in the physical world, it's not too different when we get a customer that comes to us and we set them up with a partner. We provide that introduction, that opportunity for them to be able to have those in-depth technical conversations to unearth what they're looking for. We're always there to back them up, obviously. But I think that now, so when you get the opportunity to then showcase it in digital and then provide it, that's another one of those things Derek was talking about. It's an opportunity. So go big on those things to be able to provide it for the attendees.
I love that, bringing in the sponsor and everybody into that journey of the attendee. And I am curious, Derek, from your perspective, as we talk about these opportunities and maybe new areas of digital and our chances for us to engage people in new ways on their phones, on their laptops, maybe even elsewhere, maybe in wearables or something else. Are there any new types of technologies that we should be keeping our eye out on in ways that there may be a chance for a virtual event or a virtual experience to happen and follow people through?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about specific technologies just because there's so many different ones that are currently being explored right now, but I think the focus here should be on really 2021 and hybrid events of yes, we're doing all of this investment into technology now, but what kind of foundation are we building for the future? Because all the money that we're spending now should be the foundation for those hybrid events in the future. And so, I mean, you could grab AR and VR as an example, right? Like that's probably not like a thing now necessarily, but because, you know, we're not going to be in that shared space. But to what Cam was saying, as far as like, how do we connect people directly to sponsors? Well, like AR and VR might be a great way next year when people are at the event to make those same types of connections that we saw working this year, but then use that as a springboard for helping people do things in a new way next year.
I think that's really interesting. This hybrid event, kind of building on a little bit too of these different hybrid scenarios that businesses are exploring. Sydney, are you seeing some of your partners working through this and starting to think through, okay, we were physical, now we're digital. What does hybrid mean? Is that something that is surfacing in the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, hybrid is not new to EA by any means. We've been doing it for years. I think Derek's on point where right now we are very focused on, of course, no one's going to get in a room together. Not even our producers. We actually have ways to fully remote produce. If no one even goes into a studio, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, exactly. 2021 hybrid is going to come back into the picture, and getting thousands of people in a space is not going to be the norm right away. So the conversations we're having are a lot about, you know, what can we build now, as Derek was saying, like what can we set up that we know we can use moving forward? We know we're going to have a remote audience from here on out, no matter what. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually a great thing. Again, reaching as many eyeballs as possible and you know, having inclusivity is really, really great. And we are thinking about the technology as of today, because of course it's an investment. But I think in the future, it is more of a conversation around what is the benefit of attending online versus what are we going to then offer in person? Because we also have to remember, if we're in a case where we're charging tickets, you know, how are we balancing that of like what we'll end up charging attendees versus what will be the benefit of maybe paying more and showing up in person. I think that's going to be the new kind of conversation as 2021 starts to come up of how are we structuring the value across both, or how do we make sure that the value is there for both audiences? We don't want anyone remote missing out on something that might be happening in person. And especially if networking's big, how do we bridge that gap and make sure there's still connectivity across any audience?
Great point. So I think that at this point, I'd love to just kind of talk through the last question that I have for all of us, which is a somewhat personal question. I'd love to just ask each of you, what has been your favorite part of a virtual event or virtual event that you've seen, and why did that one stick with you personally? And it just as a way to kind of say, this was my take on what's working for me. Not necessarily what works for everybody. We're trying to, it's obviously we have an ability to be more inclusive, but what was that beautiful moment that you thought, this is the one that works for me? And Kada, I'll start with you.
Well, like I said, we've been doing a lot of work on just exploring other platforms and watching a lot of virtual events over the last few weeks or last few months, actually. So narrowing it down is a little hard. I'll tell you, there's been elements of these different platforms and experiences that I would pull out, and that we're sort of factoring into some of our planning moving forward. I've kept a close eye on the networking and the engagement. How are people connecting? Interested at some teams are still using multi-devices, right? They're using multiple devices using their mobile app to either access the web experience or to use it for networking. So I thought that was great. It still becomes a tool that you can keep and use that networking later on. So networking's been a big piece. I don't have a particular one that I love. And just seeing how other conferences are. The big wow factor to me is that they're still bringing in big name entertainment. Like, I think that's pretty amazing. And that they're still, finding that's extremely valuable, for part of their delivery. So I don't know, I think those are some of my big takeaways. I can go on and on because we're really taking a lot of time. Branding is another big area for me. We spent, we had an incredible team behind us making sure that the branding of the experience was really well thought out, from the very beginning to even having a, musical component to our experience. And then it carried throughout all the sessions with banners and, people having all the branding as part of their delivery. So to me, the branding, I've kept a close eye on that as well.
Great. Cam, how about you? Do you have any salient pieces or aspects that you thought, man, this is really going to be great this year or next year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of in the same boat as Kada. There's been so many different things. I think the general sentiment of lots of our smaller customers and stuff that have said, thanks for still doing it. There's lots of information that I still need to learn and I want to see. So that's always nice to know that, even if it's just one couple people, that you are helping them. And you do get a few nice emails, which is good that it comes in. I think selfishly, I think it's being the digital lead. The focus is on my team, whereas when the physical's happening, it's all about the big physical and digital. Now it's the digital which is really exciting, to be able to flex your sort of like strengths in those areas, and sort of do, to Derek's point, which we've said before, do some sort of stuff that you haven't done before, test those things. And I think everything that new areas we're exploring are things we're sort of A/B testing for next year. If we do come back into this sort of hybrid event, physical and digital. So I think that they provide us good opportunity, and it's hard to sort of put a finger on the exact thing that has been the nicest thing, but I think the fact that we've been able to remove barriers to entry with the digital event has been the nicest thing for me. And I think that it is far more attuned to where we want to be as a business. So yeah, I'm pretty happy that we can serve that up.
Great. How about you, Derek? Is there any digital event that you've gone to or seen as part of your work that you've thought, man, this is really going to be a game changer?
Yeah, so this happened to me before COVID and everything happened, but it has stuck with me for a long time. And this was when Tesla announced their Cybertruck. So my wife and I were sitting in bed watching the announcement, and they're going through all these videos of the truck and shooting it with a gun and whatever, and then he picks up this giant steel ball, right? And you're like, no way is he gonna throw that. And he just like chucks this ball and it smashes the window, right? The pictures that all of us have seen. And then he goes back and he picks it up again. And you're like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And he throws it again and makes another huge smash into this window that's supposed to be, like super tough. And to me, what was striking about that was the power of being live and the power of being raw. And like, I walked away thinking that the Cybertruck was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, in spite of the mass faux pas that happened. But it was because they were so genuine about the presentations. And I think if these virtual events can capture that, which is one of the things that I think draws us to physical events, that would be amazing.
That's a very salient example. I think that many of us saw at least the aftermath of that particular virtual event. Sydney, how about you? What have you seen? What stuck with you?
Yeah, and again, it's hard to pinpoint one specific thing, but I think just a general theme I'm resonating with most is just the authenticity of a lot of the way that a lot of brands have approached navigating this environment. Salesforce, I think, is a really great example. They kind of had to shift focus very quickly and decided that instead of doing some of their events leading up to Dreamforce, they're doing, actually, I think it's still going on right now, an ongoing virtual event series called Stories of Resilience. And they have really high-end speakers, as Kada was alluding to, like still getting that big draw, such as Mark Cuban, and having them speak to how they're navigating these times with their smaller businesses, so that they're providing kind of that sense of emotional connection with their audiences. And again, giving their audience what they need right now. They want to hear, how can my business succeed in this time? Not just, what is Salesforce going to do for me? And I think they did a really nice job executing that. And I think, Google Cam, I know you guys are doing a series as well. And I'm so excited about that one. It's another example of, I am trying to also get clients to be in the mindset of, you don't have to do 2 days. You can have an ongoing series. We can spread this out. I think from a format standpoint, it makes a lot of sense, again, because everyone's busy. So trying to take up 8 hours versus an hour could really be a game changer for some people. Obviously that depends, but yeah, I think just in all the free events and all of the non-ticket prices that have been going on, I know both IBM and Google are free. And I think, again, given the sensitivity of the current climate, it's really a good thing to do, and to still provide your audience something that they need right now, that they have access to.
Great. Thank you. So that concludes kind of the panelist discussion portion. We do have some questions from the audience here, the digital virtual audience as it is. So we're going to kind of go through those, and I'll ask a few of those. And anyone feel free to kind of jump in. I'd love to keep this natural. So first we have from Chelsea. How do you think attendees' expectations will change as you're able to shift back to in-person events? Example, on-demand content, announcement monetization, or will hybrid events be the new norm?
I can chime in a little bit here. I absolutely think that, nothing really does replace a face-to-face event. I think that is critical. I think we've, can all agree to that. There's nothing like, nurturing that relationship with that client, and being able to have those face-to-face conversations and that opportunity for networking. I absolutely do feel as though moving forward, that we will continue to have hybrid approach. We'll always have a virtual aspect of, or digital event as part of our strategy. So I think we're going to see this as a movement of, our event planning moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say we're certainly doubling down. This is 100% going to be for the next couple of years. We've started our just a couple of weeks ago. We started our 2021-2022 planning, and they fully include a hybrid strategy. So I think what we've spoken about over this whole sort of like nerd therapy session is about how this is opening new doors, and this is sort of changing the way that we have traditionally looked at things. And there's nothing better than challenging the way things are done. That's where, Derek would be getting excited. That's where innovation happens. So I think that's exciting to see. I think that where the value comes is who's prepared to sort of really go hard on those things and try new things. And I'd say, don't be worried if they don't work. It's exciting to see things try and work out and have a go at them, because you might hit the Tesla moment, and that's okay, because all those things you can flip them around to be great things, and you might find something which is really awesome.
Great. So we have another one here specifically on inclusivity of digital events versus live. So which the attendee mentions, it opens up a whole new world of event engagement and structure, and they'd love to know more insights into virtual event planning platforms being used and any learnings to date of those virtual event platforms.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of start on that one. I'm sure you are all having platform fatigue, as I am. We have been digging the deep depth earth of what is out there and what has existed. And it's interesting how many different virtual event platforms, kind of almost translating conference-like worlds into the online space that already do exist. I think it's, the key to realize is that they all have nuances. There's things about them that are really great, or there might be a focus of a feature that they really shine in, but then be wary of the other ones. It's really important that you evaluate the user experience across every single feature that you're looking to engage, and not just face value, check the boxes. We found this it happens all the time where a vendor might say they have networking, and then you go to use it and it's actually not anything you thought it was, and it's not going to provide the value that you want for your attendees. So, that's something we do every day at EA, is get on the phone and do so much due diligence across the board of what solutions and feature sets we want to include and what is out there. And if a platform doesn't exist, how can we create something custom but still leverage the existing foundational elements of solutions that do exist? So, of course, we're not building completely from scratch. There's just a lot of ways you can look at it, and it's about really asking the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next question here, super panel, through the digital transformation of physical event formats, what are a few ways that event organizers can ensure their participants, whether they be buyers, attendees, or sellers and sponsors, define success, right? To help them define success and help them show positive ROI to acquire them as a returning customer, whether it's as an attendee or whether as a sponsor.
I'll take a moment for this one. So I think a couple of things that we talked about. So it's just, I think the one thing that you can guarantee when you come to any of these conferences is the content is amazing, and that you're buying good quality content for, what you're getting. And I also think that, as we continue to build and learn on these virtual platforms and we grow together as an industry, the value of these are going to get even greater, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think brief connectivity issue there. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on that one.
Sure. I mean, just to elaborate, I'm sure Kada was going to hit on this point of just as you would an in-person event, you need to establish your KPIs and understand like what is reasonable and achievable as far as metrics and what you can collect and understand about your audience to really prove the value of what your audience or you got out of it. And there's so many different ways that you can do it. It's obviously dependent on what you're putting out there and what your company's goals are. I'm sure that was something along the lines of what Kada might have been alluding to.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, Cam, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with both of Kada and Sydney there. And I think what's really important, and I think it's a great question whoever asked it. I think what's really important is from the outset, make sure that you've done your attendee journey mapping. Like really make sure that you understand what that unique insight is for those attendees. And there might be 10, 20, 30 of them, but understanding each one of those. And then definitely right now is a great time to reach out to them. Reach out to previous attendees and ask them through surveys, or jump on the phone and or reach out to them and say, what does value look like from us, X company, if we're delivering something to you? Nothing is better than that sort of first-hand knowledge, and I think that people are really open to that at the moment. Digital event fatigue is being thrown around, and we're seeing articles being written about that already. And we're only a couple of months sort of into this new world, if you like. So I think if you don't have the teams yourself, then find a great partner, an agency that can help you do that digital journey mapping and that user journey mapping and get to the core of what people want, and then build from that. Like always build from that, because your KPIs and your reporting and stuff will naturally lead back to what your business is looking to do.
Great. I think all of that helps really form a holistic answer. So we have another question here, kind of leaning on other industries. So the asker asks, what can we learn from the entertainment industry or other industries to amplify the innovation of the digital event space or hybrid events? Derek, I'm going to shift this over to you, seeing the innovation in other spaces as well. What can the digital event space learn from entertainment industry or other ones?
I go back to what Sydney said earlier, as far as the quality of the content being just like first and foremost. With the plethora of options we have now with on-demand entertainment, whether it be Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever. I mean, like live TV almost has like no shot anymore, right? And I think we're going to see a similar shift happening with virtual events, because people are going to be able to skip from one to the next. And so if you have that super long keynote that's just dragging on forever and ever and ever, like people are just going to have fatigue on that. But I think we can take a page from maybe what we've seen with TED Talks and how they limit theirs to, like I think it's 18 minutes or so. And it's like, what is the point? And how do you do all the hard work up front to make sure that what's being delivered on the back end is really tight and really focused to your audience?
I also think too, I think you're exactly on point. And our big thing is looking at it through a broadcast lens, just as you said, and thinking about the fact that people are watching and they want to be somewhat entertained and expect quality. But I also think even you think about Netflix and all of the, different streaming solutions and how, they're so recommendation focused. And I think as we start to evolve into hybrid and start to build the foundational, virtual spaces, and our attendees maybe are returning, like how AI and the recommendation engines are going to play a factor in how we serve content to them in the future. I think that's going to be a critical, it's going to become pretty commonplace, I would imagine, in the next year or two.
Great. So we have time for about one or two more questions. So here's one, interesting. What have you seen with outdoor festivals as far as creating hybrid experiences in this very physical space? I don't know. Yeah,
I'm happy to give an example of what I saw. It was less hybrid and more, this one actually really resonated with me, because we know a lot of our events have an entertainment aspect to them, or there's a happy hour with a DJ. You can still include that type of entertainment. I still think having that kind of exclusive opportunity to have the concert from your living room, like they did a couple of weeks ago, having that moment with like a live artist is still really endearing, but having it involve your audience a little bit more, I think, is really important. So, there was one example I saw where Steve Aoki did a DJ set, but they had a Twitter contest in advance that prompted user-generated content, and there were select winners that were given access to an exclusive Zoom link so that they were around the frame kind of dancing along with him. And it made, you as an audience member feel like you are a part of a group of people instead of just viewing the DJ, which feels a little awkward when you don't see any form of an audience. So I think there's a lot of ways you can creatively kind of engage people alongside of, an artist or something where someone's supposed to be performing, but no one's really in front of them. I also think too, in the future, as we move towards hybrid, treating it as a VIP experience is going to be a really good opportunity, especially if you have to limit numbers. I've also even seen an example so far as people were on boats, different boats floating down a canal, and there was one DJ in the front boat. And so no one was really close to each other. There's a ton of ways we can get creative with that, for sure.
Yeah. I haven't had a lot of experience with the festival sort of thing. I think it's a really interesting question. One thing that I would draw a parallel, which might be interesting, is the Some Good News series that happened, and what an incredible case study of like how to bring together moments that were meant to be physical and realizing them in a digital space. And sure, John Krasinski has much better friends than I do to be able to call on to create those experiences. But I think looking through that whole series as a event producer and looking at that, there are incredible lessons in that about the way he was coming up with things to engage people from traditionally physical things and making it now virtual and digital, and still creating a great experience. So if you need some inspiration for that type of thing, I would look at something like that. I'd also think back to, I'm not sure that this is the first time that these types of things have been done. If you look at concerts like Live Aid and stuff, they broadcast globally around the world where these things happened, and you didn't have to be attending them, but you could still watch them on TV or watch them online and still participate. That's kind of like an engagement thing where their numbers are much higher in the digital than in the physical, but you've got both. So looking at what that broadcast structure is, the way it's produced, the way it's marketed out, and the way that they actually bring people in to engage, I think, you know, there's some fantastic examples in there you could really pull from to think about it yourself.
Great. So this is the last question we have time for today. But one attendee, this question comes in about VR. Are there opportunities to implement conferences fully in VR, or is the barrier for entry just too high right now? So
Derek,
I'm
you wanna take
laughing.
that one, or do you want me to?
I'm laughing because I know Sydney's passionate response to this. So,
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
no. I think there's a lot of events that had been scheduled for earlier in the year that have pushed back, thinking that they were still going to happen later on this year. And I think a lot of those events are under a lot of pressure to still do something. But I don't think a full-blown VR, let's mail everybody $1,000 headsets, and then let's figure out how to actually package content into the VR capability. There's just like so many new things happening that I think you're kind of asking for more than what you're bargaining for there.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I love VR, and I think it works for very certain instances. It's just exactly that. You're going to invest in sending everyone a headset. Everyone has to have the right setup and gear at home. It does actually involve a lot of barriers, but that's not to say it can't be incorporated someday when we're back hybrid or in other ways. I would just be mindful too of your audience. You know, not everyone is comfortable using VR yet, believe it or not. Will be in the future for sure, but maybe not today.
Yeah. Just to build on that, I think you've got two fantastic answers there. Google obviously has a very big VR and AR unit within us. I've certainly looked at it. One, it's very expensive and it's very difficult to make edits and stuff after the fact. So that barrier to entry right now, I think with all cost sensitivities to everybody, you should really think about. And I also think, yeah, Sydney made a great point. If you have to understand your audience. I know I'm beating this drum, but go back to understanding your audience and how they want to consume that content. That's going to be your biggest success metric of how you get through to them, and then ultimately what's successful for your business. VR and AR can be very polarizing. Some people love it, some people don't, and generally the decision makers are a little bit sort of wary of those types of things. They are more traditional in their buying decision and buying flow. They may see it as that was a good, fun little bit of a gimmick and stuff. But when budgets and stuff are tight, do you want that to be a core area of where you put it? Or is it better to put it into more authentic content, more interesting sort of engagement for the masses rather than the individual? I think that's where you get more value for it.
Great. So I know we're at time or a little bit past, but we want to thank everyone for joining us today. And I hope everybody found this conversation as inspiring as I did. As we convert over to the post-panel